Good evening. It is Monday, March 23rd. This is a special meeting of the Guilford Board of Education. We are meeting tonight for the purpose of identifying where we will take the additional budget reductions that the Guilford Board of Finance assigned to us at their March 5th, 2026 meeting. At that meeting, they determined cuts to both the town budget and the Board of Education budget. And again, it is our job this evening to identify what lines and where we will take those reductions in the budget so that it can be put forward then with those specifics to the town meeting on April 7th and the referendum on April 21st. We were given we were told to reduce the budget by an additional $300,000. While we were deliberating as a board prior to our vote to create a budget to send the Board of Finance, we worked from a list of possible areas for reduction that guided those discussions. Those were provided by Dr. Freeman and the administration per our request, because it was important to us to have his sense of where it made the most sense to consider reductions. Of course, we have the opportunity as Board of Ed members to also suggest and consider and deliberate and ask Dr. Freeman about areas. So tonight, the task is to consider this $300,000 reduction and deliberate on where we will take those additional reductions, and then have a final vote tonight to make that decision final. By way of introduction, before I turn it over briefly to Dr. Freeman, I will note that the pension committee in town made a decision to make some adjustments that have resulted in the opportunity for the Board of Ed to reduce their pension line by $134,000. Just as a note of context, this was also a pension committee decision that impacted the town budget. And they likewise had part of their reduction was able to be identified through that pension reduction on their side. So as we go through our discussion tonight, members will note that the list we have in front of us, which includes much of what our original list had, but wasn't ever anything we acted on, and has a couple of additions that Dr. Freeman will walk through for our consideration, does include that $134,000. Assuming we take that, and that will obviously have to happen through our own vote, we are then looking for an additional $166,000 for a total of $300,000. But Dr. Freeman, you put together a couple of items here, so I'm going to turn it to you for some presentation of what you are suggesting here.
Thank you. So while this worksheet in front of you will look substantially similar to the one we looked at before, we've taken the liberty to make a few changes. There are some additions to this list. The $134,000 pension reduction is something that we only became aware of after you had already acted on your budget. So that's the first and the most significant of those changes. You will see another series of several small item reductions that we listed as well. The approach that we're taking here is a thin slice approach, that we're making multiple reductions across multiple areas rather than going deep into any one area. The other liberty that we have taken is that I have clustered a group of reductions together at the top of the page. There's a space separating them from the rest. That cluster together totals $300,251. So they're there because this is going to be my recommendation as well as putting it on the worksheet. Below that space, however, are a number of other areas that I either brought up previously when you were making your own reductions that we hadn't looked at or that we had chosen to forestall looking at, or they were items that had come up in conversation. So I'll run through at least that first cluster, which would make my recommendation to you here tonight. The first is obviously the reduction of that $134,000 in pension. It's an adjustment. It's something that I absolutely feel we need to do. Next, we do have one other FTE reduction that we are showing on this list, and this is a teaching reduction that I am bringing forward. It is not a classroom teaching reduction, but it is a teaching reduction. Specifically, it falls into the area of instructional coaches and specialists, and even more specifically, it is the last specialist position that we are currently carrying in the district. We've talked before, and I mentioned that there is now a cohort that we have built up over the last 15 years of 14 coaches and specialists in the district. It's currently 13 instructional coaches and 1 specialist position. In the past, we have filled 4 different specialist positions. There has been a math specialist, there has been a STEM specialist, and there were 2 technology integration specialists. Those have all, at this point, been whittled down to 1 technology integration specialist. The logic is that in those other past specialist positions have been repurposed as building-based instructional coaching positions where they are working the most closely with teachers, working directly with students. To eliminate the technology integration specialist position would be a salary reduction of $65,000. We would pull 1 salary from the budget. Additionally, it carries the coach and specialist stipend of roughly $13,000 that is assigned to that position. And the very next line shows potential retirement savings. I want to be clear that we're talking about a singleton position in this. There's only 1 technology integration specialist in the district. We have already looked at the individual who fills that position's certifications, and we know that there are other vacant positions, teaching positions in the district that that individual can move into. So while we will be eliminating the position from our roster, we will not be laying anybody off in the process of making this adjustment. That said, it also will generate, therefore, some retirement savings. We know the salary that that individual is in now. We know the salary of the vacant positions that that individual could slot into to fill, and there is a delta there. I want to point out, it is not a $55,000 delta. I spoke to a couple board members earlier today and I misrepresented that. We are suggesting that much of that 55,000, about half or more, will be recognized for this 1 reassignment and reduction. But Linda and I have looked carefully and we thought that we could, at this point, add some additional retirement savings to that line, much in the same way that I'm about to suggest reducing legal and district supplies and site improvements. It again is a bit of a liability. We are going to assume that this year, we know that we will have fewer hires than normal this year because of the significant reduction in the K-6 certification area. But we know that we will have vacancies that fall in other areas and that we should have the ability to recognize some slight further retirement savings for moves like this one, but in addition to this one. So we are talking about reducing that 1 specialist position. It would mean reducing the salary that goes along with it, and that reassignment would add to that $55,000 of retirement savings that we're suggesting here. We're further suggesting that if we look at our capital lease, that we are able to bring that down by about $3,000. Linda can give you more of the details there. We're looking at reducing our legal expenditures next year by about $5,000. We will have legal expenditures next year, but we just concluded last week 4 significant contract negotiations that are all now complete. We will not have 4 negotiations next year. We will not be spending as many evenings out with Attorney Weinstock as we did this year, but we think that that is a reasonable reduction. We're making a further reduction to the supply line, and we're suggesting a further reduction to site improvements. We have already reduced it by 50,000 to get here tonight. We're suggesting a further reduction of another $20,000. Those items together, taken as they are now, would represent that reduction of 3, and we could change the site improvement. We could back $250,000 out of there, and that would bring us into exactly the $300,000 reduction that you need to make. With less detail, we do know that we could make further staffing reductions at the high school. These would be teaching reductions, but it would not be full positions. It would be, again, a class from this department, a class from that department, and we would be able to reduce another FTE at the high school. We had talked about possibly reducing interventionists in the district. I mentioned that we had 14 coaches and specialists. We have 8 interventionist positions in the district. The 2 most recent added only last year, but we could restructure and make reductions there. You have already reduced 1.0 custodial positions in this budget, 2 part-time positions. We talked about the possibility of going further there. You know that last year we reduced the budget by 5 paraprofessionals. Those have been added back into the budget this year after the budgeting process. I did not hear summit from the board to make those reductions, but we discussed them. We talked about some of the non-special education paraprofessional positions like the library and orchestra support positions. We talked about a technology position that is very different than the technology integration specialist. The technology integration specialist is a certified teaching position, often at the higher end of the salary scale, just like all the other instructional coaches. The technology support position that we're talking about here is essentially one of the hardware and data positions. We currently have 7, 1 in each building, and then Kevin has 3 additional positions that are assigned to the technology department district-wide. We suggested some discussion there. We had talked about the addition of the new 10-month special education coordinator administrative position. This is the only position of the things that we've discussed so far tonight that is new in this budget. And so it would be forestalling an addition, not cutting something that's existing. We talked about the 4 curriculum stipends. Remember, last year, our original proposal was to work with 12. We only added 4 last year. We're not adding any this year. This would be to strip those out again. And then we had some conversation very briefly about assistant coaches at the high school level. Every year we have assistant coaches who are funded through fundraising. We talked about the idea of backing off there if necessary. Again, none of those items in the lower list come to you tonight with my recommendation, but I'm certainly willing to speak about any of them. And there obviously are items that didn't make it to the list that we're willing to talk about tonight as well.
All right, thank you. So I'm gonna try to organize this, but make sure we have time for any and all discussion that people want to have. I am gonna just simply start with a pension. Is there anyone who has any concern about reducing the pension by 134,000? All right, so I think that's an easy starting place for that. Okay. So what we have here, you know, I think we knew if there was any kind of significant reduction coming out of the Board of Finance, that this would involve at least a position, if not several. And the recommendation that we all just heard coming from Dr. Freeman is to take that from the coaching staff, the instructional coaching staff, to take 1 position. So happy to start a discussion there, or also field questions before we get into a discussion. And I do actually have one, either Dr. Freeman for you, Linda, or for you, which is, do we have an approximate amount that would be connected with reducing the coaching position. And identifying just the teaching position this person would go into and the savings there. Is that approximately 30,000? Just so I have a sense if it becomes a topic of conversation, whether we try to take less than 55,000.
Yeah, so Linda.
And maybe you can't do that.
So in that 55,000, there is $10,521 of additional, so there's about $35,000 of
Connected to the one
connected
reduction
to the
itself.
one reduction itself.
Okay,
And
that's
then there's
helpful.
10,521 is the additional amount that we think that we can cover.
That's minimal exposure.
For
beyond-
that
other
gets us to
positions.
45 and this says 55.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
45, sorry, 45. I
You're
think.
right. Yes, we added an additional $10,000 there,
Sorry.
but that is minimal exposure
Okay,
for that sort of retirement savings.
okay, so I'm ready to start discussion.
Can I just have a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
Of course, sorry.
So that means that okay, so I know that someone's retiring, right, at the high end.
Right,
And the person that would have maybe slid into that spot instead will go into a teacher's position. Potentially.
Yes,
What kind of a pay cut is that person going to have to take to do it? Is it
None.
30,000?
none,
none.
Okay.
So
except for the stipend.
right, coaches and specialists are certified teachers who are on their own pay scale. And so the person would be moving from a specialist position into another certified teaching position and would go in at the step at which they would be at next year had they stayed in their coaching position.
But they lose the 13,000.
Yes, the stipend does not travel with them, but the salary travels with them. It's not specific to the assignment, it's individual to your time.
But to
working.
them, it's like a
Yes.
$14,000 pay
But-
cut.
but
I do-
When you look at it.
I do
that way.
want to say, though, that no matter how this were to happen, reducing a coaching position,
Yes,
if we didn't have, if the administration didn't have a position for which there will be an opening to move this person into, they would still move into the teaching classroom ranks and lose the stipend. So
That-
that's not unique here. It's the way it's gonna happen regardless.
and should we choose to make another coach reduction tonight, that would play out again as well.
Yes,
Yes,
And so, to be clear, the retirement is not the exact vacancy that we're describing here. It's a different retirement that would then allow us to move a teacher into the coach
the
position.
person who
correct?
currently fills the technology integration specialist position that I am recommending tonight that we eliminate
Mhm.
is not retiring
Okay.
from Guilford
Thank
Public
you.
Schools. There are, however, other retirements for which that individual is appropriately certified and qualified, and we believe would be very effective. So if you work for the Guilford Public Schools, you are never assured of your position next year. But the contract does say that unless you are terminated for just cause, you will have a job for which you are qualified and certified at your pay level where you were. And so we know that we can achieve that for this individual who is involved if this recommendation goes forward.
and for newer board members who may be well aware of this, but certainly also for the public. It has not been unusual in my 14-year tenure to identify in any given budget year, retirement savings as part of our budget.
Mhm.
It's something we've done far less frequently over the last several years. And I would suggest that's largely because the current teacher shortage and hiring environment means we're less likely to be replacing a retiring teacher with someone with a significantly lower salary. That just doesn't happen as kind of typically as it has in the past, but it's not unusual for us to have retirement savings in a budget that we put forward, just as context.
Dr. Freeland, can you explain the role of the tech specialist?
Yes, and it's one of the reasons that you're seeing this one recommended through the technology integration specialist is the only coaching position that we have left. coaching specialist position where one person is expected to be supporting teachers across the district. And so we added the first of these pre-pandemic. It was while we were growing out the Chromebook model, and the idea was to have at least one specialist in district who could help teachers lesson plan and appropriately use and leverage tools of technology in their instruction in the classroom. As we entered into the pandemic, we increased from 1 to 2 when all of a sudden every teacher in the district found out that they would be teaching remotely. But this individual is spread across all 325 teachers in the district. Now, we work with projects and we sometimes move and focus that attention for a year here or there, but every other coach is assigned at a building-based level and supports far fewer teachers than this position is expected. We would anticipate that moving forward, the instructional coaches would continue to be responsible for the appropriate use of technology tools and, based off our last conversation, AI in the way that they teach in the classroom. So we're not walking away from the importance of what this individual does, but we're going to push that responsibility into the building-based coaching and not have one position responsible to 325 teachers across the district.
Do the building-based coaches already have this knowledge, or are they going to require training to be able to cover this person's aptitude?
To greater and lesser degree, and not to the degree that this individual does, but they can continue to be resources so that the instructional coaches never purport to know as much or be as talented as any individual teacher, but they know how to help other teachers be better at what they do. So the coach doesn't necessarily walk in saying, I'm the expert and I know exactly what you should do tomorrow. The coach is there to help you figure out how you're going to be better tomorrow. Now, they do work collaboratively. They learn together. They share that out with the teachers. Teachers at the buildings in their professional learning communities will decide this is what we want to learn about together this year, and the coach facilitates that learning. So yes, to greater and lesser degrees, and none of them to the degree that this individual has. We won't be losing this individual as a resource in the district. We will be losing the flexibility to move this individual around to support that learning. But I have every confidence that our coaches and teachers will be able to continue to do this work moving forward.
And just to follow up though, you still have an IT group that is designated to different buildings to help with the IT issues within those buildings, if I'm not mistaken. You have a team of people. It's not just Kevin, it's.
Yes, the
Okay.
IT team, however, is far less instructional than
Yeah.
right? The IT team is there to work with the data and
Right.
communications and the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hardware.
Making
However,
errors.
it would be the unusual building technician who could sit down with an experienced 25-year teacher and push that person's lesson planning and task design. They're there to help with I don't want to minimize it to say just the hardware, but that's a big piece of what they do. They're there to keep the systems running. They're not there to challenge our design and our teaching. And the technology integration specialist was there for that, to help push that for everybody. Is there for that. There's been no decision made at this point.
It's a good conversation to be having because we've talked about the coaching specialist model for a long time now. And, we've heard a lot from the public in terms of, why that's not an option for cuts. So I just think that, this is a good exercise to go through no matter which way we go. Because, should we revisit coaching and specialists again in the future, it's really the same exact thing that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at someone on the top tier with a stipend. And these are the savings that we could potentially recognize. So it's good to know. And it's even better to know that there's really no human capital cuts coming
That's
of
right.
this.
That's right.
Well, and again, right, there are other reductions in the budget. I want to be careful here tonight that we don't necessarily have a path for every one of the other reductions that were built into my base budget that I brought forward to everybody. Now, we're working very hard in the HR office to try to be able to do this type of mapping, but we have not identified a path like this for the 8 other teaching positions that are already cuts in this budget. And again, I want to say, well, 7 teaching positions that are cuts in this budget. There's 1 clerical reduction as well. Now those were in my base budget that has come forward. We haven't had this kind of conversation about, there's the budgeting side and then there's the staffing side, and the budget conversation always has to come first. And then we have to do everything we can on the HR side to try to find paths like the one, it just happens that I'm able to discuss this one for this one reduction tonight. There's 7 others that we have not talked about that we will continue to work very hard on.
Can we talk about, on the bottom section, there's a position, network technician. It's on your kind of secondary list.
Yes.
Can you explain, this position, exactly why it doesn't look to be an FTE? It's marked as 1 FTE, but the salary does not look to be 1 FTE, so.
These are not teaching positions. This was the rest of the technology team that I was talking about. So every building in the district has a non-certified position. It's not a teaching position. It's not a union position. It is one technician who is at home in every building, works closely with Kevin and the rest of his team, and is there on site every day to make sure the stuff is working in every classroom. And so if there is a network connection problem, if there's a hardware problem, if the touch screen isn't working properly, that person is there to ensure that those parts and pieces are working for every teacher. The salary is far less than a teacher's salary because it's a very different position than a certified teacher. There are 7 building technicians. There are then 3 other positions connected to the technology department that are more district-wide in nature.
Okay, and so of those 3, are they all this equal position in terms of this non-certified position at 36,000?
There is some differentiation in salary that has to do with time in district and
Right.
possibly the size of the building at which you are assigned. This is not a unionized bargaining unit, so there are 7 people who fill those positions. There's some differentiation in that salary, again, based on size of building supported and time in district.
And what does reshuffling that look like? If we go from 7 to 6? Would that mean that,
It's actually from 3 to 2.
Well, no, there are 7
Right.
total, and
Oh, 7 total.
what it would likely mean is it would likely mean that at least the larger schools would probably still have 1 person assigned to the building physically on a 5 days a week. The smaller buildings, and I don't know if we'd start counting that at Baldwin or at the elementaries, there would be probably a trouble ticket system that would go into place, and it would be dealt with centrally from Kevin's office, so that we would be receiving tickets and we would be sending people out. It would be a Guilford-based geek squad that we would be working that way. It would have an impact on the immediacy of having 1 person in every building, regardless of the size. Doesn't matter how big the building is. If a teacher is planning something special and everything crashes, it doesn't matter if you're in the smallest elementary school or at the high school. If you have to put in a work ticket and wait for someone to get there, it's going to affect your instruction for that day.
does it affect safety? Like, are any of our safety systems potentially offline and not able to get attended to if we go to a ticket system?
I wouldn't think so, no. If we're dealing with something like the security controls, the e-locks or something of that nature, we would scramble an immediate response. No, but it would have an instructional impact. I would not suggest it would have an impact on safety.
We have again in front of us a recommendation for position reduction with an instructional coach. Comes with a decrease in the budget of 65,000 for that salary, 13,251 for a coach stipend, an additional approximately 35,000 in potential retirement savings embedded in the 55,000. We also, again, at the top have a capital lease, the capital lease line with an administrative suggestion that could be reduced by 3,000. Legal could be reduced by 5,000. district supplies could be reduced by 5,000. And site improvement line could be reduced by 20,000.
I'd suggest we change that to 19,000.
I was just gonna say somewhere we're gonna take, I will take that
Yes.
$251
Yes.
out.
You make that
And
19,000.
then we have this list below. What other budget lines, either among recommendations that anybody want to ask questions about or discuss or deliberate
I have a
about?
question and then kind of a statement
Sure.
for all of us. We don't, this budget's not guaranteed to pass.
That is
so
correct.
with that in mind, what we're talking about up top here are not real significant human impact, you know, to the teaching staff.
Right.
At Guilford Public Schools. Whereas down below, these are impacting people. And so that's something to keep in mind in terms of as we do this, you know, as we come up with this 300,000 now, this top list seemingly doesn't affect our human capital. To that note, like if we should have to start talking about that, if the budget does not pass, more information, can you give us more information on the 4 curriculum stipends? You know, this was historically something that we didn't offer, yet people still stepped up and gladly contributed to curriculum. Are there people in place that are currently receiving these stipends? Are they guaranteed to continue to receive those stipends, or is it cyclical in terms of, you know, you're always looking for new staff members to be involved in curriculum?
The answer to all of those questions is yes. So I'll start with the point that, again, I want to make clear that Guilford Public Schools, especially at the district level, is very administratively thin. And I know that that has been a topic of conversation, but our curriculum office is one certified position. It is one assistant superintendent. Many districts our size would have part-time or full-time curriculum coordinator positions that would be associated to connected to the curriculum office. So you might have a coordinator for elementary education, you might have a coordinator for secondary education, you might have a coordinator for the related arts. And it would not be unusual for those positions to be associated with the curriculum office. We have been working on a teacher volunteer model for a very long time. What's happening with curriculum work is that the pace is picking up. And so curricula should always be living documents and should always be in review. But what's coming out of the State Department and what's happening with books being written about AI and what's happening is that it's picking up and it needs to be more active than it ever was before. And we are recognizing with the additional expectations on teachers that teachers are taking their summers and they are stepping back and they are finding ways to reinvigorate and re-energize, and they are not necessarily picking up the voluntary opportunities that we offer through the summer. So we had originally thought to build 12 of these stipended positions where we would have classroom teachers who agreed for some small compensation to work beyond their contract hours and take lead on this work. We will still form curriculum committees, as we most recently did with PE revisions, health and PE revisions. We will still need to rely on larger groups of volunteer teachers. But right now, what we currently have are 4 teachers across the district who are receiving these stipends and are taking more of a teacher leadership role in the curriculum design and revisions that are happening out of Dr. Goss's office. So yes, if these are cut, those 4 people won't be receiving these relatively modest stipends next year that they did receive this year. We will still be asking them to step up and do some of the work that they did prior to the stipend on a volunteer basis. Now, it also becomes an opportunity for a teacher who's hopeful to become an administrator.
Sure.
This becomes a good opportunity to learn and practice some of those skills. Not as good as an opportunity as if it was a 0.5 administrative FTE, which many districts do offer, but it was a step in the right direction. And again, we didn't add any this year. This year, we would have liked to have added number 4 and grown that cohort of folks who are working. We're holding at the 4, and while it's on the list, I'm not recommending it for the cuts tonight, but you're absolutely right. If we need to come back again to make further reductions, the things on the bottom of the list are going to be our starting point for further conversation if we need to make further reductions moving forward.
And the 4 individuals that are receiving these stipends, to my earlier question, are these 4 individuals continuing year after year in this position with this stipend, or do you look at this opportunity as, to your point, people that want experience, people that want to grow? Are you kind of cycling in different people? The reason why I bring that up is because if there is that cycle, it's not as much of a hit. If somebody already knew they might not be in this position for another year or so, somebody else might be.
So they're brand new. We had no intention of cycling anybody out after the first year, but I do think that if people did for 2 or 3 or 4 years, then there could be an opportunity for somebody else to come in and learn. All of our stipends, there is an expectation that once the stipend is awarded, as long as the work is of quality and meets our expectations, that the person filling the certified teacher filling the stipend holds on to that position, not necessarily permanently, but the assumption is built in.
I had a quick question on the potential retirement savings. And just a question around the, obviously, you, Dr. Freeman, are recommending the 55,000, which looks like an additional 20,000 from the
Yep.
expectation of this position. As you've already noted, and as we are aware, there have been several teacher positions already removed from the budget. And we know in this past year, the current year we're in, the administration had to hire 2 kindergarten teachers that were not budgeted because we had a higher than anticipated enrollment. I'm gonna assume the answer is yes, but I still think it's worth asking out loud that you are comfortable taking an additional 20,000 in retirement savings, knowing past history and knowing we've reduced those positions.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm comfortable, if not enthusiastic about it.
Okay.
There's nothing on this list that I'm doing cartwheels over,
Sure.
but and it gives me an opportunity to put another piece out there as well. It's not directly related to the budget conversation, but it's related to your question. I am confident in that the 7 reductions because of the enrollment projections of the total reductions that we've made, all but 1 fall into the same certification area, the K through 6 certification area. Now that is half of our total certified staff in the district carry that certification number, but we know that we will have other movement in other certified areas. And so the reductions on the one hand will not keep us from needing to hire to fill other certified positions that those K-6 teachers aren't certified and can't fill. If we have reductions, or if we have other retirements in any of the 7 through 12 subject areas, if we have retirements in
Okay,
special
yep,
education,
good
right?
point.
And so even though you're facing the reduction in the one area, if we need to hire a new Spanish teacher or social studies teacher for the high school, the one won't impact the other. That being said, when I mentioned all of those other reductions, should we need to add kindergarten sections late in the school year, any teacher who is impacted by those reductions and ends up receiving layoff notification is immediately placed on a recall list. So right now, if we're reducing 7 elementary positions and over the summer we add 1 kindergarten position, we don't go out and advertise. We immediately bring back one of those other people.
Right,
And
which
so
is great,
yes.
which is with that, that's a.
It's a
that's
little bit of
great
an
thing.
aside, but
No,
I
that's
wanted to
great.
take the
Yeah, that's a
opportunity to
great
say it.
thing, right? Yes,
We're about to have the next meeting start, so I'm gonna move that we adopt superintendent's recommendation.
so I'm gonna spell out what there is as that is a motion,
It
we will
is.
move on it. So I'm just gonna spell out what that is.
Thank you, Dr. Hirsch.
That is, a pension, reduction in the amount of 134,000. That is, a coaching position, which is 65,000 salary and 13,251 in the coach stipend. That is $55,000 in potential retirement savings. 3,000 reduction in the capital lease line. $5,000 in the legal line. $5,000 in the district supply line. And $19,749 in the site improvement line. Is that the motion, Dr. Hirsch, that you're
Yes.
making?
So moved.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second. Discussion on that proposal, on that vote.
I'll be brief. Although I appreciate you considering the coaching position, because I know that's been something we've talked about for quite a while. You know, the easiest position to not lose a person is that administrative position, and that is most of what we need to get to, and it's not an actual person. So I am disappointed, like, I'm torn, right? I really appreciate on that on one hand, and I appreciate the desire to have that administration. There is such a need. I just think in a budget like this, the easy way to save personnel is that one position, but.
I really appreciate the comment, and there's been a lot of conversation in the office about that. And right, ultimately, I go back to something that I just said in passing earlier. The budget decisions and structural decisions need to be made first, and then we look at the HR positions. And I looked long and hard at that, but I believe structurally, and in order to meet the needs of the students, that this is the best budget and structural decision that we can make. And then I want to assure you and everybody else that we will continue to do everything we can to then reduce any layoff or loss of position. But this is a structural and budget recommendation that I'm making to you. It's not based simply on attrition, or it's just not the best way to build a system and a structure, is to try to make all the decisions informed by attrition first. And I wish I had a different response, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to make that response.
Because I also don't trust the retirement savings, right? Like until the year's over, which is why I'm being so cautious. And I had done some other numbers. So depending upon how the vote goes on this motion, I do have some other proposals that I think would actually get us there without taking into consideration the retirement savings.
There have been other years.
The referendum.
There have been other years that we have booked retirement savings as high as $70,000. And so again, I want to point that with this one, particularly with specific information that's informing it, it's a really conservative retirement savings that we're suggesting here.
Other discussion on the motion that's been made already and seconded. I know there's a time limit, but this is an important decision, so I don't want people holding back if they have things that they want to say. Yes, go ahead.
I would just say that this list that we're voting on, Dr. Freeman and Linda kind of pulled a rabbit out of a hat to be able to reduce it by 1 FTE without an actual termination. And I think the town needs to know that if we go beyond this particular referendum vote, we're looking at actual terminations of employees. So I think we need to be cognizant of that, and we're avoiding that as is.
You mean additional termination?
Correct.
No, that's exactly right, because what we know from what's left on this list of things that we have looked at now several times in our first go round and here, it's all positions and 4 curriculum stipends. That's what it is. It's all positions. That's what's left here. Any other discussion on the current motion? All right, so there has been a motion and a second again to meet the required $300,000 reduction by $134,000 in pension, $65,000 in a coaching position, $13,251 in the coaching stipend, $55,000 in potential retirement savings, $3,000 in capital lease, $5,000 in legal, $5,000 in district supplies, and $19,749 in site improvement. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Two opposed, and any abstentions? Okay, so the motion passes. There will then be, we will then proceed with the reductions as spelled out in that vote. In the amount of 300,000 to meet the Board of Finance's required reductions. I do want to quickly take a moment to thank everyone for the careful consideration and discussion. I want to thank the administration for providing from their perspective some guidance on where they think this will be best. And I do want to take a moment to reiterate what Arnold has said for our viewing public. How very important, if this budget is something that you can support, that you get out and support it. If this budget does not, if the town budget does not pass on referendum, we are back at this table, and from where we are sitting now, it is cutting at least several more positions. And that's the impact on students will then continue and increase. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thank you so much for joining us.